Well, welcome to CDK Live. I am here with Glenn Mercer. I've actually become somewhat of a super fan of Glenn. I saw him speak in person at a conference recently and just found his research very insightful. And frankly, Glenn, I just found you had a great sense of humor along with sharing the research in our industry. So Glenn, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Right. Currently based in Cleveland, though from Boston originally. I had spent 21 years at McKinsey & Company, which is sort of 100 years in human years. And there I was responsible for our automotive practice. I've been independent since about 2006. And I think where your path and my path and CDK's path would have overlapped is I started doing research projects for NADA, starting out long ago with the one on facilities upgrades. And then more recently, there's an ongoing project called Dealership of Tomorrow.
Great. Well, one of the things I really loved about Glenn's research was he talks about the myth of the demise of the dealership, which we at CDK also believe that that is a myth. And so that's what really attracted me to Glenn's research and what he had to say to our industry. So,
Right.
Glenn, there's all these every year trends about the demise of the dealership. Just tell us a little bit about that and some of your high-level thoughts.
Right, yeah. Well, the industry's been around for roughly 125 years. So that says something already. If you go to each NADA convention, there's almost a theme each year of a new extinction event, as the phrase you use goes. So at one point, we thought the internet would disintermediate dealers and customers. At another point in time, we thought everyone was going to be moving back into American cities, and if you live in Midtown Manhattan, why would you never need to buy a car again, etc. So there's sort of a theme each year with a different extinction event, and our ongoing report, highlights each one as we go through. At one point, we were clustering the four big ones. We were calling them the four horsemen of the carpocalypse, because they were so worried about them.
Well, one of the things that I was hearing a lot, and I was living out west, is people were saying, well, kids don't drive anymore.
Right.
Kids don't drive.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, that was hot a few years ago. You could probably go back and look at it when it peaked. But it was sort of tied up with the whole young people don't want to own things. They want to have experiences. And one thing, therefore, they don't want to own is a vehicle. And especially with the rise in the mid-2010s of Uber and Lyft and the other ride-hail companies, why would I ever need a car if I can get around just through eternal rental, as we were calling it, and
or eternal parents driving them.
Well, there is that. Yes, talk about a very low cost of the driver in that case. Yeah, unpaid labor entirely. But in short form, they all finished playing Call of Duty. They came out of their parents' basement. They finished the university, they got a job, and then crucially, they had a child and moved to the suburbs.
Right.
That 1-2 punch. So to actually bring in actual numbers into the equation, the percentage of the American population that is licensable, that is old enough to have a driver's license, has not budged from 85 to 87% for the past 30 years. So it is true that younger people generally have been deferring getting a license. It used to be when I was growing up, the day you turned 18 or whatever the day was in your year.
14 for me.
14.
Couldn't wait.
Okay, out on the tractor, huh? Okay.
Pretty much.
There you go. You would do it. Now it's deferred. But on the other hand, you've got fossils like me who, instead of retiring to golf carts at age 65, have been driving well into their 60s, 70s, and 80s. So the overall population of drivers as a percentage of the population has not budged.
That's great. Well, the other big thing we keep hearing about, right, is the robo-taxi.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and I think that probably peaked when our friends on the left coast, as it were, were saying, probably about 8 or 9 years ago, I forget which engineer said, my daughter or sons in junior high school, by the time they graduate, they won't even need a license because robo-taxis, though they've been called them that, would be ubiquitous. And in part of my presentation I give on Dealership of Tomorrow, we list from 2017 all the forecasts for robotaxis. All of them failed. So, but on the other hand, I think we've probably now, the pendulum swung a little bit too far. We've kind of gotten into this valley of despair about autonomous vehicles. I think we're now seeing a movement back in the other direction, where in a geo-fenced, limited area, we're seeing more and more success. I think, frankly, it'll end up being like other mobility services that we've invented over time, which would be they become one more arrow in the quiver of mobility services that a customer, an American, can access. I mean, airlines didn't kill the automotive industry, but that's a rival mobility service. Hertz Rental Car was founded in like 1915 or something.
Yeah.
Rental cars erode new car personal sales, but we've learned to live with them. So I think on the robotaxi front, we're probably going to be okay. And I think that we'll see more of them. But there's one little footnote in there that's interesting is for the last decade or so, we've always assumed that autonomous vehicles will be so expensive that they'll only be owned by fleets. But as we say that autonomous vehicle technology becomes cheaper and cheaper, I think we're having to relax that assumption. And it might be that if the robotaxi starts to work in, say, 2029, you might just own one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why not just buy one for your own personal autonomous vehicle?
Right.
So we'll see.
Well, great. Well, how about the Chinese? That's another big threat to hear about.
I think we go back to maybe 2006 and 2007 and Malcolm Bricklin bringing, I think it was Chery Automotive supposedly coming to America. And I think it's only natural because you say, well, the Japanese arrived and made a huge impact and they're here to stay. They're in NASCAR, right? You know, Hyundai and Kia, amazing penetration in the industry, and all three countries have moved up into luxury. So the natural assumption is China. Right. The thing is, I think one door closed. That the door was that those three brands all came in under our price umbrella, right? They were a cheaper alternative, then they moved up. I think when the Chinese started looking at this, they said, a $5,000 new car relative to a $5,000 3-year-old Accord. Why?
Right.
Their competition was all these wonderful used cars that like CarMax is selling. So that door closed. The other door that opened was EV.
Right.
Because the Chinese have figured out EVs, and so maybe they would come leady with EVs. Then I think a guy named Joe Manchin just closed that door again, so that the Chinese might come to America with EVs, but they'll be not at all eligible for any of these credits that are coming out. So that might have closed the door back again. We'll have to see.
Okay, well, we're at NADA again. Yep. And so every year there's a new sort of myth that we need to bust about the demise of the dealer. So I think this year we're hearing a lot about the direct-to-consumer model from OEMs. And obviously we at CDK do not believe that that is going to take the dealership out, but would love to hear your thoughts.
Right. There's a whole range of both commercial and legal things going on here, of course. And so I'll stay away from things like if a car company already has dealers, can they go direct without unfairly, competing against their own dealers? We'll sort of set that aside.
Yeah, lots of regulation in space.
We'll just stay with new entrants. While I think the dealership model is the superior model for distributing cars, and no, I don't think it's because of our franchise laws, because if it's our franchise laws, they're remarkable in their global reach, and that every other country in the world uses dealerships as well. They're designed differently and things like that, but it's not like it's only in America. So I think that's a good vote over, 125 years and 175 countries that the system, in various forms, it is superior, in large part because demand goes up and down, but car companies like to produce at a level rate. And so we need a buffer in between that can allocate and distribute inventory as it builds and draws down. In recent years, of course, at least last couple of years, thanks to the chip shortage, we're in this bizarre world where demand exceeds supply, which I don't think we've seen since the late 1940s in America when GIs came back from the war and they all wanted a car. I think there's some thinking by some OEMs now that, well, we've now trained the customer to wait. We've trained the customer to order. We train the customer not to haggle jointly with the impact of the pandemic. And so as we go forward, can we reduce the role of the dealer somewhat and have more of a direct OEM to customer contact and with more of the money flowing to the OEM? And I think I think we have entered a new world where there's more OEM direct contact to the customer. But when we get back into any kind of normalized and supply-demand world, I think we get back to, maybe a modified dealership system still remains superior.
Yeah, actually, in our research that we've done actually shows you would think people our age want to go into the dealer more. We certainly still want a dealership relationship, but the reality is, which we found in our research, is the millennials, they want to go into the dealership. They want to be educated. And as EVs come into the market, even more so, people want the dealer engaged. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm an OEM about to convert a huge amount of my product line to EV, wouldn't I want 4,000 sales points, each with 10 salespeople out there proselytizing and explaining? Now, this means we have to train up our salespeople because it is a complicated sale. If I'm selling an ICE car, I just sell the car. If I'm selling an EV, I'm selling the car, how to charge it, and how to get any of those incentives, so it's more complicated. We have to do a good job. But yeah, we've got sort of a prefab sales mechanism for helping to make the EV transition. And then we've also got lots of points where we can put chargers in and things like that and reduce charging anxiety. So I think more than a few OEMs have come to realize the dealer network may be an asset in making this transition. The other thing, too, is, if we don't know just how demand for different models and cars will shake out, and if you want to go to a direct-to-consumer model, well, if your model isn't a big hit, you now own all the inventory. And dealers have been very good at helping to smooth that out. And I think we've seen with one notable direct-to-customer EV company just in the last few weeks.
Couple issues?
Having to, slash prices for a product line that supposedly was supply limited. So, and you end up with customers saying, last week I paid $50,000, this week it's $40,000, what happened to me? And with a dealership network, you can really moderate and control those kinds of whiplash effects.
Yeah, and one of the other things our research is telling us as well is in the EVs, obviously service is still going to occur. And actually, people want to come to the dealership for the service. They really want to come back to the dealership that sold them the car. Whereas we know that in normal service for the ICE vehicles, sometimes people are going to the independents, but which we're working on with the dealers because that's a huge area of profitability. But in EV, there's even a bigger area of profitability for the dealership. So what are your thoughts there?
Well, on the one hand, we do know that over time, and I've talked to dealers in Norway, right? 75% of Norwegian sales are EV, 35% of the fleet's EV. They would know, what the long-term impact is. And for talking to them, they say, service maintenance and repair work on EVs is generally speaking maybe 40% lower than for ICE over the long run. Now, of course, dealers have faced this in the past. We had, the shift from mild steel mufflers, which burned out all the time, to stainless steel. So I'm pretty confident that dealers will find ways, maybe through service contracts and things like that, to continue to be profitable in service revenue. But leaving that aside, the opportunity is, as you've just mentioned it, right now, virtually every EV that is sold comes back to the dealer, for services, the customer says it's a new technology. I don't trust Jimmy's garage on this yet. But I will say, so it's about 100% service retention versus, what is it, 20% or something for ICE. But it is the dealers to lose. I think dealers really have to get on top of this. Maybe it's a separate EV service area, whatever it takes, but really have to make sure that, because the independent aftermarket is wily and motivated.
Sure.
I've already seen one lubricant company marketing EV transmission fluid. I didn't think EVs needed fluids. Already on this. So I'd say it is a bit of a threat over the long term. You can offset the threat, but please do not let the current walk you've got on this business erode. Absolutely.
Great. That's great advice. So we've got just a minute here left. So I really want to end with, so you've been here at NADA. Is there anything you've seen that surprised you, or that you've been hearing from dealers that's or OEMs that's kind of a big trend that you think we're going to be sort of, you heard it here first from Glenn kind of moment? So
I think it might be if we have the franchise system here and direct to customers here, in between is something which is in the rest of the world called the agency model, where the OEM owns the inventory and sets the price, but there's still a third party involved in doing the transaction. So the big thing I'd almost put, it's like, what was the Sherlock Holmes story about the dog that didn't bark in the night? That was the thing that was interesting. Is everywhere else around the world right now, there's a lot of activity in changing channels from dealerships to the agency model. Not really on the radar scope here. It may be infeasible to get going in America, but I would say NADA and others looking further ahead are watching this one closely. I think to name names, you could say Ford is sort of trying to cobble together that kind of mutated system right now in the United States. And I would just encourage dealers to get educated and be alert on this. It's not even necessarily a bad thing, but it's something that I do notice some complacency about.
Well, would you agree, though, with dealers? It's not going to put them out of business. So it's not the next sort of, it's not the next huge thing from a out of business perspective, but technology and innovation and the big area that we're seeing is in engaging your consumers. You've got to invest in that. Like you said, whether it's in the service department with EVs or just overall consumer engagement. Because if you don't invest in that, it doesn't matter what myth we're trying to bust, you're going to go out of business because consumers are ranking that engagement higher than price. It's not just about the price point. They want that engagement. That's one of their number one areas of focus.
Right, and that maybe hooks back to your comment that you're seeing younger people actually wanting to go to the dealership. I think we have in our minds, especially elderly types like myself, this idea that the optimal
experience, elderly, very
distinguished, experience.
Distinguished experience.
We have in our mind this sort of cliche that the optimal amount of time spent in the dealership is zero, right? That it's so horrible and so painful, But I think it's a little bit, what do they call the senator effect, right? Which is you ask Americans, what do you think about politicians? And say, they're all crooks. Except my senator is different, and that's why I keep reelecting the same person. So it happens with the dealership experience, I think, as well, which you say, oh, I don't know, I think they're shady and you can't trust them. How are your last 2 or 3 purchases? Oh, they were fine.
Right.
My dealer was fine. So I think dealers have to keep working on this, have been working on it, arguably maybe since Saturn launched, really, to improve that engagement and that experience. And I think we're getting past the idea of, just reduce the pain points. I think you can really take that time at the store. Customers, I don't think it's so much they don't want to spend time in the dealership, they don't want to waste time in the dealership.
Right. And they want to be delighted when they're there.
Yeah. And, let's go look at the service department. Let's look at other models. Maybe here's yours, but you want to look at these 2. My son, who's a yucky young urban creative, the free popcorn does it for him, in the waiting room. So, but I think we've learned our lesson. We've gone beyond it's bad and minimize it to, okay, we've minimized it. It's not taking too long. Now let's improve it.
Right. Totally agree. Our research shows that as well. So even a place for the kids to play.
Right.
Or just
leave them there for a couple of days, maybe, if you could. Yeah, that's your feature.
That sounds like a great idea. There you go.
Better work with that one. Okay. Right.
Well, I know we're out of time, Glenn. Like I said, becoming a super fan, love your insights, your research. So
thanks.
Really, really happy that you're able to join us here at NADA. And we have a lot of research directly from CDK out here online as well. So if you're joining us virtually, go check out all the great research and you can hear a lot of insights from our industry experts. Thank you.
Thank you.